tour for this book, Bad Monkey, and my only requirement, the only demand, the only diva demand that I made of the publisher was that I end up in Montana, because we spend our summers here and have for many, many years. I've been coming here to Montana for 25, almost 30 years, so it was a great joy to me that the last stop I had was St. Paul before I landed here a couple weeks ago, and half of my family is Norwegian, and not a bundle of laughs. Well, it's shocking, but Brokaw said, "You're the only funny Norwegian I've ever met." So I'm sitting at the signing in St. Paul, and everybody looks like a relative of mine, and then all of a sudden someone comes up and says, "I'm your fourth cousin." Like I'm supposed to. I don't even know what a fourth cousin is. She went on, she had portions of my family tree that she wanted to discuss with me, and I was telling someone outside, I've looked enough at my family tree to know that the branches aren't supposed to converge as often as they did. Back into the old country, the Sigdal Valley in the old country, apparently the dating pool was small. Anyway, I said, I'm not the one in my family interested in the family. She was very serious and earnest, as most Norwegians are, and I had no idea what she was doing with the copy of Bad Monkey in her hand, because it was bound to be upsetting. This first of all is not a book for kids. I do write books for kids, and this is not one of them. And if anyone comes to the line and is buying it for their children, I have the number of the Department of Children and Families, and I'll be reporting you for that. I was at a book signing in Miami. This is a true story. I'm at a book signing, of course, in Miami, and there's a very young child she was 9, and she had a copy of Bad Monkey, and her mother was standing next to her, and I said, "Well, that's your mom." She goes, "No, I already read it." And I looked, and all I said was, "Mom?" And she goes, "Well, she got a last email from Amazon, and she ordered it without me knowing it, and already read it." And I'm going, no, this is not for 9-year-olds. And the kid says, "It's okay." She goes, "I already read Lolita." She says, 9 years old, I swear, 9 years old. So please don't. Yeah. Read it first before you show it. I want to talk a little bit about the book. I don't read often from the books. I'd rather talk about where it came from. This book is set in Key West, Florida, and in the Bahamas, and a little bit in Miami, Florida. And I got the idea that I wanted to write literature that had both Medicare fraud and a monkey in it. I went to see this movie, this Great Gatsby movie with DiCaprio, and after I saw the movie, I went back and reread the book for about the 4th time, and I kept thinking the whole time that what a different book it would have been if Daisy had had a monkey. A monkey riding in a Duesenberg. I thought Fitzgerald missed a bet with that, and I went back in my mind through all, Moby Dick. If Ahab had a monkey on that boat, he would have a different take on everything. The book starts off with a couple fishing in Key West. They chartered a fishing boat to go out and catch some tuna and bobby or whatever for the day, and they're trolling along, and the mate yells, "There's a fish on," and as husbands do, he elbows his wife out of the way and picks up a fishing rod to reel in the fish, and what he reels in is a severed human arm. Now, in Miami, this doesn't even make the newspaper. Nothing. But in Key West, it's a big deal. It's a tourist town, and its floating body parts are usually not good for the tourist trade. The sheriff doesn't want to do it. The other problem with the arm is that when the guy reels it in, the tourist guy reels it in, there's a hand still attached, and there is a digital manifestation on the hand that suggests that the owner of the arm left this world aggravated state. So the book, the central character of this book is a guy named Andrew Yancy, who's a detective. He was a detective in Key West, and he has been demoted. I'll get to that in a moment. But his heart is in the right place. He was a good cop, but he's made some bad romantic decisions in his life, and one of them ends up with his losing the job of his life. And the problem was that he began having a love affair with his dermatologist's wife. Now, if you know anything about Florida, you know that this is a true case of torn loyalties, because if you find a good dermatologist, the wife has to be something incredibly special. But Yancy falls for this, the wife of the dermatologist, and there's an altercation that takes place, if you've ever been to Key West, at Mallory Square, at the docks, where they go down at sunset to watch the whole crowd comes out. Nowadays, you watch the cruise ships come in, and Yancy, this altercation involves well, here's what happens. He's parked under a banyan tree. He's vacuuming out his car with a dustbuster, minding his own business. And there is his girlfriend and her husband, the dermatologist, walking along. And there's a heated discussion. And in his own mind, he perceives that the man is threatened. The doctor is threatening to either strike or do something bad to the woman. So he, being chivalrous, and all having only in his hand the dustbuster, rushes semi-heroically into the picture and disables the dermatologist with the dustbuster in an unapproved way that's unapproved by the manufacturer. This is witnessed by hundreds of cruise ship passengers who are debarking, and you see this as maybe one of the little skits that they do in Key West at sunrise, and they all take pictures of it. It's a mess. So the dermatologist is politically connected in Key West. It turns out he's biopsying the whole county commission at one point or another. So Yancy's in big trouble. The sheriff calls him and says, "You can't be on the force anymore. Everybody saw this." And he's going, "You mean I'm being fired?" He goes, "No, I got you another job, sort of in law enforcement." And he goes, "What do you mean, sort of?" And he goes, "Well, you'll be health inspector. You're going to be inspecting restaurants. It's roach patrol is what we call it in Florida. And this is not a lateral career move. You can't spin this into a lateral career move. He's now, from busting robbers and making great cases, he's now doing a vermin census in some of the eateries in Key West. Yancy wants desperately to get off of this beat. You can imagine, I didn't go, people said on the book, I got interviewed a bunch on the book tour, and they said, did you go on any restaurant inspections? And I said, hell no, I didn't go. I mean, I like eating out. But in Florida, we have something called the Sunshine Law. And what that means is that it's a big public records state where you can look at almost any document compiled by law enforcement or any state agency, including the health department. So you can look up any restaurant you want, and you can look at all the health inspection reports in gruesome detail. And I don't recommend this, but I did it enough to know all the categories. How, for instance, one of the things I learned in the research, and I don't know if this is true in Montana, but in Florida, when they inspect a restaurant, they have to keep separate tabulations of the dead cockroaches and the live cockroaches. I can't imagine why this would make a difference to someone eating in the restaurant, whether it was moving or not moving. If you have a cockroach in the Caesar salad, it doesn't matter whether it's dead or alive. Your night is pretty much over. Anyway, so I threw a bunch of that stuff in the book, and I just thought my aim was to make the reader a bit sympathetic with Yancy, and so his job, this arm that I told you about, ends up in his freezer, because he's, as a favor to the sheriff, he's sucking up to the sheriff, he's trying to get his job back. He says, okay, I'll keep it in my freezer, and he's supposed to run it up to Miami and turn it over to the morgue in Miami, because they have all these unclaimed body parts, and the sheriff's view is it's got to match up with something up there, right? But Yancy, the whole thing falls apart. And he decides that this wasn't, they said it's got to be a boating accident, probably somebody coming over from Cuba. It was a propeller accident, it was a shark got the rest of them. But Yancy thinks it's a homicide, and so he sets out to solve and get his job back. He thinks if I solve this case, I get my job back. The Medicare fraud. Florida, South Florida is shockingly the Medicare fraud capital of the United States. It is also the identity theft capital. It's also the foreclosure capital. As I mentioned, it is also the floating body parts capital of the United States. We are number one. And but the Miami Herald, where I still write a column for the Herald, we cover Medicare crime rather regularly. And some of the biggest cases we've had lately have been Medicare fraud. And so I was inspired partly by some of them. I'll give you a couple examples. There's a guy who just got 8 or 10 years. I don't know what he got. But here he was stealing from Medicare. By that I mean he's filing claims for services, for goods, for stuff he didn't deliver. It was very easy. He stole a bunch of patients' IDs and started just filing claims. Medicare's got this great program. They pay first and ask questions later. True. So what you have is you have a window of a couple of months before people start auditing your claim records. And in that couple of months, you can open a storefront, make millions of dollars, and shut it down before the feds get there. That's how it works. So this guy, I've never heard of this before, he had some sort of Medicare thing, and he was making, they said somewhere in excess between 30 and 50 million bucks that he made, and here's where he sent the money to be laundered. Cuba. Now, you know, only in South Florida, if you're a money launderer, you try to stay away from socialist countries because their banking system is not what they're known for. He sent all this money to Cuba to hide it. He got caught. We had another guy, one of the big shifts in crime, in the fashion of crime in South Florida is away from the dope business and into Medicare fraud. And a lot of dopers have gone into Medicare fraud because the low risk, the money was just as good. You didn't need to have a car with a big trunk. You didn't need to have an AK with you. You could just do your business on a laptop and make millions of dollars. So a lot of dopers have gone into Medicare fraud. And there was a guy, this was a great example. This was just a few months ago, he got sentenced. He got out, he spent 9 years in the federal prison in Florida on a cocaine charge. He gets out around 06, 07, just before the real estate bubble bursts. And he goes straight from federal prison to mortgage fraud. He starts bundling mortgages. And he's welcomed into this industry. We had at one point 2,500 convicted felons in the mortgage business in Florida, too, including some convicted murderers. So this guy wasn't even high on the list of bad guys doing it. The Herald did a series sort of exposing the fact that anybody could sell mortgages in Florida. The state sort of cracked down. So the guy leaves the mortgage fraud business and goes right to Medicare fraud. And he made, in only a couple years, I think he made something like $8 million, more than he'd ever made running cocaine. And he was living the good life, and he got caught. He was off in prison again now. But it was just, when he gets out, I'm thinking, now what? He's been through all the best crimes. And in Florida, when you think Medicare fraud, you think, isn't it futures in politics? We have a governor who was the CEO of a company that paid the biggest fine for Medicare fraud in the history of Medicare. And he was forced out of the company shortly before the indictments came down, and his whole election campaign was, hey, I never got indicted. He spent $78 million of his own money that all of us contributed to by our Medicare contributions. That's how his companies made all that money. And he walked away with a couple $100 million, and he spent $78 million getting elected. governor of the state of Florida. I mean, that's the sort of story you cannot put in a novel because nobody would believe it. This character that now is in charge of our state is beyond anything even my own sick, twisted mind can think of. So he's not in Bad Monkey. Governor Scott is not in Bad Monkey. He'll get reelected too, don't you worry. What else? I got to talk about the monkey a little bit. Here's the real reason, and I don't know if you call it a literary reason. I got tired. I go to almost any movie, a TV sitcom. They all have a gratuitous monkey in it now. There's they're all in the Hangover series, and they're running these monkeys into the ground as far as I was concerned. So my thought with this was to create a monkey with substance. A monkey with a backstory. A monkey that had actually something to do with the plot, like a real character in the book. And so I started thinking about, with all this, the monkeys are sort of the big thing in show business. And I know I had a couple of experiences with movies, converting my books to movies, and I know sort of how it goes with the animal thing. And so this monkey, Driggs is his name in the book. This is his backstory. I'll give you a little bit of it. I mean, he is a very, very bad monkey. He's awful. But let me tell you, there are no good ones. I've been on the road with this book for like 3 weeks, and at every book signing, somebody comes up to me and tells me a monkey story. That's just mortifying. And it always starts the same way. I had a pet monkey once. That's how it always starts. From there, boom. So anyway, here's Driggs' backstory. Part of it is based in a true framework. The very popular Pirates of the Caribbean movies were filmed down in the Bahamas, in Greater Exuma area. Beautiful part of the Bahamas. And as you know, there was a monkey in those movies. In one movie, he's kind of like a desiccated skeleton monkey, but he's always obnoxious and impish. But anyway, they had and I know how it works. They didn't just send the studio didn't send like one monkey to the Bahamas and say you got to do all this. They sent like a whole raft of monkeys down there because there's a monkey that makes the funny face. There's a monkey that jumps through the sail rigging. There's the monkey that scowls. There's the stunt monkey. There's the stand-in monkey that they use for the lighting of the real monkey. It's just a cluster of monkeys. And it's Disney too, and Disney doesn't do anything halfway. When you say, send me some monkeys, you're gonna get monkeys. So my thought was that I wanted my monkey in this book. What if he gets all the way to the Bahamas? First of all, my monkey comes from a show business lineage. He's got a mother who's in sitcom Friends. He's got his whole. I mean, there's high expectations for this monkey based on his genetics, and he gets in trouble right off the bat because I described this briefly, but one of his first gigs in L.A. He's a rally monkey for the Angels, and they happen to put the camera on him just when he's grooming a particular part of his body. 40,000 baseball fans don't want to see. So he gets fired from the rally monkey gig. He uses some connections. He auditions. He gets the part as one of the Pirates of the Caribbean monkeys. They send him down there. Something very, very bad. He does something very, very naughty involving a rack full of brunette wigs. Very bad. They say, we got to fire this. And you understand why they have to fire him. When you read this, there's no doubt he's got to lose his job. There's no second chance. There's no second chance. You're out. But I also know enough about Hollywood to know that the studio is not going to hand that monkey a ticket back to L.A. They're just going to cut him loose. You're done, monkey. You're on your own. Now you're in the Bahamas. get by, do the best you can. So he drifts from island to island. There's a little bit of a show business aura about him because people say, oh, he worked with Johnny Depp. So there's an inclination to welcome him prematurely into families and into different relations. They always the Johnny Depp monkey, and they don't realize what a bad monkey he is. And so he ends up on this island in the care of a very sweet guy named Neville, who is fighting to save this little piece of land that his family's had for generations, and it's been bought by an American developer, very common in the Bahamas. Neville doesn't really know how, but he's taken in this money. You want him in a dominoes game, and he's trying to rehabilitate the monkey. He's not going well. In any case, Yancy, pursuing his theory of murder, ends up on the trail, takes him to the Bahamas, where he collides with the bad monkey. And I don't want to tell you what happens after that, but the monkey has a very substantial, meaningful role in this book. And he's a very important monkey. He's not a gratuitous monkey. I don't know that there's going to be a movie, but if there is, I'm going to personally oversee the selection of the various monkeys that are brought in. And the book sort of ends partly, there's a big hurricane in the Bahamas, of course, and everybody gets what they deserve. That's all I can say. I will say the one selfish thing about writing a novel, after sort of growing up in the newspaper business and being a reporter for many years, now a columnist for many years, the most frustrating thing about that business is you don't get to write your own endings. You go out with a notebook, whatever happens, and the endings are often not what you wish. They're not the old adage is they don't send you to the airport when the plane lands safely, and so you sort of you develop a built-in cynicism and also sort of a wishful way of thinking. Wouldn't it be great if I could have written a better ending? One of the first kids' book I wrote was called Who, and it starts out here in Montana because that's where I started writing it. And the story goes weeks back to Florida, and it's about a bunch of kids in Florida who are trying to save this little species of burrowing owl that we have in Florida. It's literally no taller than this water bottle. And the owls live on the ground. They're not tree owls. They live on the ground in these burrows. And somebody was going to build actually going to put in a pancake house in this little neighborhood, and they're just going to bulldoze the owls. Now, that really happened. When I'm in my own, that's just a page out of my own childhood. It wasn't a pancake house, but it was, when I was growing up in western Broward County, there wasn't much to do. We come home, so get on your bike and you ride out with your fishing rods out west to fish in the Everglades and stuff. But on the way, we'd pass all these cool little owls. They'd be up on there, they always were watching you from the burrows and everything else. And then, this was the boom years of South Florida, the really boom years, and so before long, all the land was bought and the developers came in, and my friends and I would get on our bike and everything would be bulldozed, and they would bury all these birds alive in their nests with their babies. It was perfectly legal back then to do that. They just cranked it up and off they went. And my friends and I, and we were young, but we did some of the things that the kids in that book who did, and we had our own form of monkey wrenching, and that we tried and failed. One of the things we did, it was kind of lame, but we were literally 10 or 11 years old, was we would go out early in the morning and we would move all the survey stakes around. We just randomly, they'd all be lined up. We'd just say, screw it. We'd do little patterns and we put it, and then we'd hide and we'd watch when the engineers and the builders showed up. They're trying to figure out, what is this? It'd slow them down, but it didn't stop them. In the end, the owls all got killed. And but the point of the story is that when I sat there, when they asked me years ago if you wanted to write for kids, do you ever want to write a book for kids? My first reaction was to this editor was, have you not read any of my other Are you out of your freaking mind? Why would you expose a child to this? They said, now just wait a second. They said, you know, kids love smart-ass humor. They love the irreverence. They like the environmental message. They like the settings, the outdoors, the wilderness, and the attitude that you bring to the adult books. You can still have that in the kids' books. And so I thought, okay, I would give it a shot. With the selfish idea that when I write this book, this first book, which was only going to be the only one I'd ever done, I mean, I had no plans to write any more kids' books. But I thought, well, if I'm going to write about these owls and this thing that happened when I was a kid, the ending's going to be totally different. It's going to be, everything's going to be okay. And that was the great fun of that, of doing that. And it's the great fun of actually the grown-up novels as well, is that the bad guys get what they deserve in my books. Always, always. Nobody walks away. If they do, they're encumbered or disfigured in some hideous way. I spend so much time, I spend a lot of time thinking, this is such a rotten person. And I know that my fans are not going to be satisfied if it's just someone comes and puts handcuffs on him. No, I've got to disable him. I've got to do something hideous to him, poetic and tastefully rendered. You know, but nonetheless, years ago, I'll tell this one story, then I'll take some questions. Years ago, I wrote a book called, this was the second novel I ever did on my own, called Double Whammy. It was about the sex, murder, and corruption on the professional bass fishing circuit. That was an easy sell in New York. I said, Gore Vidal is on this now. We got to move. I'm sure that's his next book. Anyway, there's a scene. At the time I wrote it, I tried to be sort of timely and topical. And at the time I wrote it, in South Florida, pit bull dogs were the absolute rage. Every two-bit dope dealer had a pit bull dog. This is sort of by law, every homestead trailer park had 3 or 4 free-running pit bulls just attacking people at random. So I wanted to put a pit bull in this novel, and I wanted this is kind of what, when you write satire, you can kind of crank it up a little. I wanted the ultimate pit bull attack. So in the novel, there's a bad guy, burglar breaking into a double wide, you know, and out of the shadows comes flying this pit bull. He grabs him on the arm. There's a struggle. He manages to kill the pit bull. This is before the stand your ground law. It's way before in Florida, you know. And he kills the pit bull, and dog doesn't let go. Dog is dead as a doornail, hanging on his arm, and he can't get the dog. And this is the beginning of a relationship that goes on for maybe 103 pages. The burglar becomes delirious from infection. He names the dog Lucas. He calls the dog Lucas. He pets the dog. He crams food in, you know, the dog's jaws. When he goes through the turnpike toll booth, he holds the dog so that the toll taker can pet the dead dog. It was a sort of a Disney kind of incredible journey. It was so sick. It was really sick. And it was really odd. Lucas was, you know, just, anyway. So, years later, I'm doing a book signing in Boulder, Colorado, and at a mystery store there. And there's an older woman in line, maybe my mom's age, and she works way up to the line. She goes, "I love your books. Thank you for coming. Thanks." And she goes, "My favorite book you've ever written was Double Whammy." I said, "Oh, wow, that's great, you know." And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "It was wonderful." And she leans forward over the table and she whispers in my ear. She goes, "I named my tumor after Lucas." Absolutely true. I truly did not have a response. And I sort of sat back in the chair, and and I sat back in I signed her book. I sat back in the chair, and she's leaving. I go, "Well, are you okay now? Are you all right?" And she smiles and she rolls up the sleeve of her blouse, and there's a scar about from here to here. And And she smiles and she goes, Lucas is gone now. She gives me a little wave and out the door. So this is a fan base that you can be proud to be part of. I don't know any other writer that's had a malignancy named after one of their characters, so I'm pretty impressed. I want to take some questions. We've got about 15 minutes or so. They're telling me for questions. And we can talk about whatever you want, this book or any of the books or whatever. You just know. I knew that. I always end with that story because it just anesthetizes. This vision in my mind. You're like, oh, let's cancel the dinner reservation. Let's just go. Any questions? The Governor, Skink, the old governor, is in a bunch of the novels. For those of you who don't know this character, it was in Double Whammy. That was his first appearance, and I needed a hermit guy for a couple. This is very literary. I needed a hermit guy for a couple of chapters, and I gave him his backstory that he had been elected, and then don't laugh. He was a completely honest guy who got elected governor of Florida. So he only lasts like 3 months, and he goes running out of the governor's mansion, stark naked, disappears into the woods, and I sort of bring him out as sort of this avenging angel, and he appears in a bunch of the novels, and he just sort of became a moral compass for a Skink did, and he's not in this book. He'll be back, and I hesitate to even say this because I see there's a few children in there. But in the next kid's book, he's going to be in the next kid. I can't protect him anymore. I just can't. Time has come. So Skink will be back. Yes, ma'am? Somebody had a hand up. Oh, just a twitch. Tip of your hand. Oh, there you go.
Why did you name the 2 kids after Fish and Chomp?
That's a good question. In Chomp, I named 2 kids after fish. I think fish tuna was one, right? Wahoo, yeah. Well, Wahoo wasn't named after the fish. The character named Wahoo was named after Wahoo McDaniel, who some of you may be old enough to remember. He was a professional wrestler, and he was also a linebacker on the very first Miami Dolphins. We could use him actually today. But I always liked that name. I remember as a kid. I was a kid when the Dolphins were first formed as a football team, and their big star was like Wahoo McDaniel. I thought, what a cool name. So I just stole it. That's what writers do. We just steal stuff. But I liked it. As a kid's name, it's better than calling him well, I don't want to say any names because somebody will some kid's going to stand up and say that's my name. Yes, in the back.
Do you still golf?
Do I still golf? Yeah, I do a little bit. I wrote this golf book a few years ago. It was nonfiction. It was called The Downhill Lie. It's the scariest book I've ever written because every word of it was true. I'd given up golf for 32 years. I gave up golf, and it was the best move I'd ever made. And then some high school buddies of mine talked me into playing again after 32 years. And by the way, that's what everybody in their 50s should do, is take up an impossible sport like that. So I kept a diary, and the diary, because stuff was happening to me that wasn't happening to anybody else on the golf course. And I sunk a car in the lake, and I didn't think anything of it because I thought, well, it's electric. Surely other people drive cars. I wasn't in it, but I sunk it. I parked it on a hill. My theory, here's my story, is the brakes failed. I parked it on the hill, set the brake, and I went down to the edge of a lake, a pond, full of alligators, water moccasins, everything, to find my golf ball on this course called Sandridge in Vero Beach. And I'm bending around looking through the muck. I hear something behind me. I hear the squeak of the suspension of the cart heading into the water, and my Callaway golf clubs are on the back, right? So here's what I do. I go, and I pull like a Lone Ranger move on this golf cart. I jump on the back of the cart. And we're going in now. There's bubbles and stuff flying up. And I unstrap my Callaways and I heave them heroically up on the bank. And I jump off. And then I got to call the clubhouse and I said, I put the cart into the lake on 15. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm sure you've got a truck ready for this. I'm sure you've got someone set up. pulls it. There's just this long silence. The guy says, that's never happened before. The club's only been open 45 years, and no one's ever sung the harp. So I mean, that was the kind of stuff that was happening to me. So I wrote it all, put it in this book. It was terrifying. That's one you should definitely not let the kids read. There's a lot of language in that book. I was quoting myself a lot when I was reading it. Yes, ma'am.
You have some very clearly defined principles and that has one choice again for all stories of anyway, so do you have a current real life hero?
That's a good question. She said, there's a lot of larger than life bad guys and heroes in the novels. Do I have a current hero? There's a lot of people I admire greatly that have done great work. One of them, I couldn't be here tonight, Doug Peacock, who lives here. I mean, it's just, it's one of the great things about Livingston. That's just the character, you've met Michael, but there's just so many talented people here, and the chance to meet guys like Jim Hiaasen and Doug, who I've been reading for years, and great writers, McGuane, of course, and Walter Kearns here, and Tim Cahill, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. If I am, I'm sorry. But there are people I admire greatly for their writing as well as for what they've done in their life. Doug's a great sort of echo warrior, going way back. There are, believe it or not, you wouldn't know it from my columns in the books, but there are actually some good people in politics too. And I don't say that, I'm not being whimsical about it, but whether they're heroes or not remains to be seen. But there are people trying to do good things here in Montana, in Florida, everywhere. There are heroes out there who are busting their humps against impossible odds. And even if it's just saving a creek somewhere or saving a drainage area, valley, or in Florida, wetlands is the big thing. We're losing wetlands at the rate of about 200 a day to development. And there are people fighting that battle, lawyers, retirees, everybody, you name it, is out there. So there are a lot of heroes. By and large, what a writer does is not heroic. But you can create characters who are heroic and who touch people in that way. And that's really what you're trying to do. Yes?
Did you ever send a scene to Montana to take off some of the flourishing subdivisions, especially down in the Bitterroot?
The skink in Montana, I don't know. I've met a few real life skinks out here in Montana. You've got some characters out here. It's interesting. You mentioned what's going on in Bitterroot. It's funny because when I started writing these books, I honestly never thought anyone outside of Florida would read them or get them or connect to them. And that includes the kids' books as well, because that's my whole background and my whole life is down there. And the letters I get from not only all over the country, but from the books are published in many, many different languages, shockingly, and a little bit. I have no idea if they're any good, but but people have the same feeling of loss, no matter where you live in this country. If a place that's special to you is gone, and it's taken just for greed, for nothing other than do we need another Walmart? Do we need another Sam's Club? Do we need that there? When that happens enough, it affects people. So when they read these books, they don't feel quite so alone. Some of them have never set foot in Florida, and they've never seen, the incredible sprawl. The place I grew up is literally a parking lot. It's from one end to the other. It's disgraceful. It hurts. My mom still lives there, and it's painful for me to go back and see how crowded and congested crime, but everything you can imagine, all the cliches that come true. So I always tell people who are fighting these battles that all the heart and the energy is the same as it was is in Florida for what the characters in these books are called. It's the same experience. Yeah, way in the back, yes. I don't have my glasses on, but you're standing at the door.
Did you have adventures when you were a child, like the protagonist in your children's books?
Did I have adventures when I was a kid, like the protagonist in the kids' books? I did have some, yeah. Yeah, I did. It was a great way to grow up with nothing but the outdoors. We caught a lot of snakes because there were a lot of snakes in South Florida. I would bring them back home and they'd get loose in the house. My mother found it very adventurous. I remember we would go. I don't know why we thought one of our missions was to catch. We had these have-a-heart traps, these big live catch traps. You know what they, and we thought it'd be fun to get a fully grown raccoon and bring it home into the house. Yeah, this is not clear thinking on our part. Catching it was not the problem. It was recapturing later on the premises that was the problem. It was sort of like one of these reality shows, like my son and I always watched the Turtle Man guy. I mean, that was sort of, that was like Turtle Man this big, we jump in. That was adventure for us, gators and all that stuff. And I went through a phase of where my friends thought it would be we could make some money selling poisonous snakes. That was smart too. Because the snake farm paid more for, believe it or not, for a poisonous snake than for a non-poisonous snake because they couldn't find enough idiots to catch a poisonous snake. So they found us. It's just kind of, but I mean, some of the adventures in the grown-up novels, are pretty close to home too. There's a scene in Bad Monkey where Yancy's had this problem in his neighborhood of Big Pine Key. He had this beautiful view of the Gulf sunset, and now some guy came in with he bought the land. He's building a spec house way above code, and as the house gets taller, Yancy's view of the Gulf and the sunset are being demolished, and he sort of starts fantasizing at first, and then maybe acting upon ways that would discourage the completion of this real estate deal. And one of the things he comes up with is that he speaking of raccoons, he relocates a roadkill raccoon, a deceased raccoon, on the property in advance of a big real estate showing. I don't know if any of you are in the real estate business, but from experience I can tell you that when you bring in clients and there's a large decomposing mammal in the main foyer, the sale is probably not going to happen. I have a friend who summoned me over to his house one day and said, I got a dead raccoon in the backyard. I said, I'm sorry. I thought mistakenly that he wanted me to come over and help him bury it. And so I get there and I said, well, you just want to bury it somewhere? He goes, bury it? I'm not going to waste it. And the house next door to him had been for sale, and a number of people had come through, and he had gotten wind that somebody they were showing the house to somebody that he didn't think would be a good neighbor to him. For whatever reason, I don't know. He didn't want him as a neighbor. He decided this would not be good. And so he said, they're showing the house this afternoon, help me move the raccoon. And I said, I'm not doing that. I said, I will help you carry it as far as the property line, and then I'm going to my car. And whatever happens with the raccoon happens. And it was many, many months before that house was sold. It became known as in the real estate world as the raccoon house, which is not a big selling point. Not like the sunset house. So this was the dead raccoon. Yes. Mm-hmm. That's a good question. That's a very good point. Skink doesn't like the tourists. Now, let's be clear. There's some tourists